Okay, so if you want to see more examples, we're going to be starting at number 7. I just want to tell you that you should go ahead and put me on pause for a minute. I did this to save a little bit of time. There we go, so I can see how long we're recording for. I went through each problem and I already labeled my x1, y1, x2, y2, and I went ahead and wrote the equation for every single one. So put me on pause for 7 through the bottom. Go ahead and write your x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2, and then go ahead and write the formula. And then also go ahead and copy this problem down. This is going to be number 13. It's the one with the fraction. Okay, so go ahead and put the video on pause and write all of that stuff down and start when you've done. Restart when you're done. Okay. All right, welcome back. So I'm going to go through, these are more examples if you need them. Okay, so we are going to have to subtract 7 minus y, right? Y sub 2 minus y sub 1. And we're going to have that divided by x sub 2, which is negative 6, minus from the formula, right? That minus is from the formula, and x sub 1 is negative 3. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. I'm going to have 7 minus y. Negative 6 minus negative 3, that's really going to turn into add. So in the denominator, I have negative 6 plus 3, which is negative 3. And what should that be set equal to? That should be set equal to 1/3. Okay, and now I've got a proportion, right? This is a proportion. And so I am going to go ahead and say 3 times the quantity 7 minus y equals negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 times 1, right? Okay, and I see that I've got a 3 over here and a 3 over here, so I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 3. That's going to give me 7 minus y, because those simplify to a positive 1. But over here, negative 3 divided by 3, that's going to simplify to a negative 1. Subtract 7 from both sides. I get the opposite of y equals negative 8. Divide both sides by negative 1. Y equals positive 8. Okay, number 8. I'm going to have 8 minus y. Y sub 2 minus from the formula, y sub 1 is just y, divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1, so I'm going to have negative 1 minus negative 2. When I simplify that, that's going to give me 8 minus y equals, when I subtract a negative 2, that's really adding. So I have negative 1 plus 2, that's positive 1. So I simplified that, and that needs to equal 1. Okay? So I can still think of it as a proportion if I want. So I'm going to have 8 minus y equals 1 times 1. And then I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. I get the opposite of y equals negative 7. Divide both sides by negative 1. I get y equals positive 7. All right, number 9. I'm going to have negative 9 minus 3. Negative 9 minus from the formula, positive 3, y sub 2 minus y sub 1. And in the denominator, I'm going to have 0 minus x. And when I simplify that, I'm going to get negative 12 over 0 minus x is just going to be the opposite of x. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So I really end up, when I simplify, I really end up with 12 over positive x. And then what does that need to equal? That needs to equal a slope that is undefined. The only way we have a slope that is undefined is if we divide by 0. It doesn't matter what the top number is, but all that matters is that the denominator is equal to 0. Okay, it doesn't matter what the top is, so I'm going to scratch that out. So what do I get? I get x equals 0. That's the answer for that one. Okay, number 10. I'm going to have 6 minus 2. divided by x minus 0. When I simplify that, I'm going to get 4 divided by x. That needs to equal negative, I'm putting my negative with the 1, negative 1/2. We have a proportion here, so I'm going to have 4 times 2 is equal to x times negative 1. And then I don't need this to be a negative 1 coefficient, I need this a positive 1 coefficient, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. And I'm going to get x equals negative 8. Number 11, I'm going to have negative 3 minus y, negative 3 minus from the formula y, divided by 1 minus negative 1. Okay, so when I simplify this, I'm going to get negative 3 minus y divided by, when I subtract a negative, that's really adding, so divided by 2. Then what does this need to equal? This needs to equal negative 3. So I'm going to move down here for a little bit more space. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and say, so that I can do it as a proportion, I'm going to go ahead and say over 1. So then I'm going to have negative 3 minus y times 1, that's just going to be negative 3 minus y, equals 2 times negative 3, that's going to be negative 6. And then I will solve for that, add 3 to both sides. I get the opposite of y equals negative 3, divide both sides by negative 1 because I want a positive 1 coefficient, not a negative 1 coefficient. And what that will give me is y equals positive 3. Sorry that I really did not give enough space on this to do all these problems. I would suggest you do them on lined paper. Okay, and then number 12, I have y sub 2 minus y sub 1. So I'm going to have y, because that's y sub 2, minus from the formula, y sub 1 is negative 3, divided by x sub 2 is negative 9, minus, because it's in the formula, negative 9 minus negative 5. When I subtract a negative, I really am adding, so that's both numerator and denominator. So I end up with y plus 3 divided by negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. And this needs to have a slope of 0. So I'm going to set that equal to 0 divided by any number is 0. So it doesn't matter what is down here. This does not matter at all. So I don't need to set this up as a proportion because this doesn't matter. All I need to do is focus on how do I make the numerator equal to 0. So I don't even need to worry about this. So then I end up with y plus 3 equals 0. I subtract 3 from both sides. I get y equals negative 3. And then I have my 1 fraction 1 on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a mixed number. So that's going to be 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. This is the same as 3 halves. Oh, that's not what I wrote. 3 halves. Alright, so same process. I'm going to have y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by, I'm going to have x sub 2 minus x sub 1. I'm going to go ahead and simplify. In the numerator, they're not like terms, so I cannot simplify that further. In the denominator, 5 is going to be the same as, okay, make it a fraction, put it over 1, and then I need this denominator to be a 2, so I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2, right? So that's going to give me 3 halves minus 10 halves. When the denominator is the same, keep it the same and only subtract or add the numerators. So my denominator is going to be a 2 and my numerator is going to be 3 minus 10, which is negative 7. Then I need to set this equal to 8/9. So I am going to multiply this. I'm going to have 9 times y minus 17 ninths equal to, and then I'm going to multiply this, negative 7 halves times 8. When I multiply 9 times y, I get 9y. And when I multiply 9 times negative 17 ninths, I get negative 17. I think I need to work this way for some space. So I'm going to multiply this out. I will get 9y minus 17. And then over here, 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 8 4 times. So I have negative 7 times 4. So that's going to equal negative 28. Add 17 on both sides. I'm going to get positive 9y equals negative 11. Divide both sides by 9. I get y equals negative 11 ninths. And again, I'm so sorry about not giving enough space, but use some lined paper and you'll have plenty of space. The end.